quote, brat. You're just that girl who is a little messy and likes to party and maybe says some dumb things sometimes, end quote.
Are you feeling out of the loop? Did you just find out that Kamala Harris is brat, and you have no idea what that means? Is she a sausage? Is she a doll with a big head? Is everybody suddenly going coconuts about somebody named Charli XCX like you're supposed to know who that is? Are you stuck in the middle of brat summer without anything green to wear? Well, fear not, because you're in the right place. There are a ton of videos with Charli lore and analysis of the brat era, but this video is intended to be a good starting place for a brand new fan, or a potential fan, of Charli XCX, coming from someone who's been a fan for quite a while. I'll go over who Charli is, why she matters to pop music, and then provide a guide to getting into her large catalog of releases. I'll cover some releases that are less obvious to those outside the fandom, but are still really fun and worth your time. And I'll drop in a few interesting, fun facts you can impress your friends with, assuming your friends are pretty easy to impress. Hi, I'm Michael, and I know a little about a lot of music. This is Eclecticism, Brat Green Edition. I've been a fan of Charli XCX since Pop 2, and she's my favorite active pop artist right now. She got her start making music on MySpace and performing as a DJ in the UK rave scene when she was still a teenager. In one of the coolest / least cool parent moves, her parents took her to these illegal raves to perform, and then they stayed there in the audience watching the show. As someone who had my parents hang around during some parties that I had, I can imagine what a buzzkill that probably was. But still, good on them for taking her. I think of her career so far in a few eras. There's before she vroomed, and there's after she vroomed. And I think we may be entering a new era, starting with Brat, but it'll be easier to know that for sure once more time has passed. The pre-vroom era was defined by Charli writing some big singles for herself and other acts, and releasing albums that, while good, were commercial disappointments. This era had some fan favorite songs for sure, and you can see Charli's attitude, sense of fun, and love of exploring different sounds throughout this era. Her first album, True Romance, is full of fun electropop, and her second album plays around with pop punk, with a bit more of an emphasis on pop. Then she vroomed. The track Vroom Vroom marked a major transition where Charli began working with producers A.G. Cook and Sophie. These producers were on the experimental and more out there edges of pop. At the time, this experimental pop was often referred to as bubblegum bass, but over time, it started being considered early hyperpop. But nerdy genre tags aside, Vroom Vroom marked the point where she stopped making pop that followed the rules of the industry and started exploring new and more unique sounds. It was still catchy and lyrically accessible, but the production choices were more aggressive, dynamic, and complex than you'd expect from most pop. Bleeps and bloops and squeaking sounds that might be possessed toys formed the musical bed she bounced her catchy choruses across. She began featuring a wide range of underground artists on her songs as well, using her platform to shine a light on many queer artists in particular, which helped to strengthen a connection between her music and a queer pop-loving audience. At first, this new approach confused music critics, and the Vroom Vroom EP was actually panned by Pitchfork. However, in 2017, when she released the mixtape Pop 2, it received Best New Music. And even Vroom Vroom has been noted by Pitchfork as a score they now regret. Her experimentation, not to mention her attitude of hedonistic fun, paired with her sometimes painfully frank exploration of her emotions, have gradually moved closer and closer to what we see in the mainstream, until this summer when she's finally broken through in a big way. And my hope as a fan is that she either maintains a place at the top of the pop world for a while, or she quickly bores of it and does something new and totally unexpected. Either way, her willingness to experiment and stay true to her artistic vision, even when her label was concerned and dragging their feet, even when her projects were criticized by the press, has paid off and has made her a major figure in modern music. She managed to have credibility among genuine pop music lovers, and just as much credibility among music nerds on message boards who say things like bubblegum bass. I could spend all day talking about her musical progression, album by album, and the first script for this video was exactly that before I realized it's probably more than you need for a primer. For a primer, it probably matters more where to start with her extensive body of work, so that's what I'm going to focus on next. I'd say Brat is a perfect entry point into her world. It's a great album that captures the essence of her music and her personality. It's also one of her lyrical high points, with her adopting a very direct approach to lyrics that cut to the core of things without any excess. Like Ernest Hemingway. The production is excellent, there are pop bangers, there are romantic songs. There are sad ballads where her lyrics shine out the most for me. Songs like So I, a song dedicated to the producer Sophie, who passed away in 2021 at the age of 34. This song literally had me crying the first time I heard it. Anyway, Brat is a great starting point for anyone, so that's where you should start. After this, consider whether you want to go in more of the pop route or the experimental route. If you listen to more Killing Joke, JPEG Mafia, or Godspeed You Black Emperor than Olivia Rodrigo or Chapel Rowan, I'd recommend moving on to How I'm Feeling Now next. This was her quarantine album, written and produced over the course of just 6 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic, with some of the lyrics workshopped with her fans online. From the music to the whole conception of this project, this was Charli really pushing boundaries. I also find the lyrics on this album very strong. And from a production standpoint, this is still my favorite album she's made. It's very maximalist and noisy, in a way that contrasts nicely with what you'll hear on Brat, which feels a little bit understated in comparison. From there, you can move on to her earliest full-length projects with Sophie and A.G. Cook, which are the mixtapes Number One Angel and Pop 2, along with the Vroom Vroom EP, which will fit in well with the two of these. This era is experimental, messy, unpredictable, and full of features that are very fun and sometimes jarring. Pop 2 is probably still the biggest fan favorite among her albums, even after the release of Brat. But what if you're not sure if you want to go all experimental yet? From Brat, you could move on to either Charli or Crash. Charli is a wonderful mix of experimentation and fun pop. Other than Brat, I feel like this album finds the most perfect balance between these two sides of her musical world. Crash, on the other hand, is one of her most pop albums of all. The whole concept behind this album was to experiment with the idea of selling out and following the big record company playbook. This was entertaining to watch as a fan, and it has some good songs, but as an album overall, it probably feels the least Charli of all the albums in the post-Vroom era. However, I do still consider it a very fun pop album, and I played the shit out of it in 2022. From there, I'd recommend regardless of your path, you go and check out True Romance. Her very first album, not counting the self-produced album she made as a teenager, which she'd really like us to forget about. True Romance is actually a very good album, even if it's very different from what she's done in her more recent career. Some of the songs like Nuclear Seasons and Grins are still fan favorites. Next, cross over and listen to the ones I've already talked about that you haven't heard. And then, once you've gotten through all of that, go check out Sucker. It's not that it's terrible, it's just that it's kind of like Crash in that it's mostly just a pop album that is only distinct because Charli's personality and her ability to write catchy hooks are carrying some fairly uninspired production. And since this was way earlier in her career, it feels like she had less control at this stage, and also might have had less confidence in her own vision. And then you've heard all the albums, except for the actual third album, which was leaked and then abandoned. But you can still track down the tracks online, and some of them are really amazing. There will be a link to finding some of these tracks in the description. I think Come to My Party is actually one of her best tracks. Also, don't sleep on Super Love, which had a super fun video and was never on an album. Or 5 in the Morning. Or Hot Girl. If you keep wanting to go deeper, there's a BBC documentary called The F Word and Me, where Charli explores what it's like to be a woman in the music industry during the Sucker era. There's another documentary on the making of How I'm Feeling Now called Alone Together. And she's also done a couple podcasts for the BBC. And once you've gone through all of that, you only have an absurd number of featured tracks she's done to explore, a lot of which are really good. In other words, she's stayed pretty busy over the years. Final thought before I wrap this up, if you're exploring Charli XCX and enjoying what she's doing, you should also explore the other works of Sophie and A.G. Cook, along with other artists on the PC Music label. You'll find a lot of great stuff there. I hope this helps you begin your journey into XCX World. If you have ideas for other content related to Charli or Brat that you'd like to see, please leave it in the comments. And if you'd be interested in a ranking of her albums up to this point, let me know, although you may have some guesses from just watching this video. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to hear me ramble about music some more. If you click the like button, it'll give me a very small dopamine hit. Take care of yourself, and